Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, your lovely host, your great host, the host with the most. That's so corny. Rob Lee. And today I have the privilege of being in conversation with a filmmaker, photographer, and writer based in Washington, D.C. Please welcome Isaiah Headen. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you for popping on and getting ready to chop it up with me on this podcast. And before we get too deep, too entrenched into the conversation, I want to open it up to, ask you a question that we all had a childhood. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
So tell me about what it was like growing up and what was that first stand-up special that you remember, like one that comes to mind? Because you're writing comedy, you're writing in that space. So tell me about that.
So I grew up in North Virginia area. I'm one of 7 kids.
Wow.
I'm the oldest boy. And so we grew up in a very religious home, as you do when you have lots of kids for order's sake. And I had fun. It was a great childhood. Made friends, got to spend time with family, travel up and down the East Coast. It was good times. I really appreciate my parents and the sacrifices they made to make that, a special childhood for me and my siblings. So I don't think my comedy comes from a dark place like most people do. I think it's more comes from, the love and joy I have being in a family that makes fun of each other all the time. And that's how we bond. And so I think that's where it's rooted in. But when I think of, stand-up specials and, stand-up comedians and just people who are doing funny things, my earliest memories really go to Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy and Delirious in his red suit. But I think I remember my parents and their adult friends sitting down to watch the original Kings of Comedy.
Yeah.
And then being kicked out of the room because it was like, oh yeah, this is not for you. And then at that point being like, well, now I want to see it because I've been removed. And so just kind of having loud, funny, no filter kind of comedy being instantly this thing that I want to connect to.
Yeah. I think a lot of those households growing up, you have those. I'm probably a little older than you in that I remember mine's wasn't a comedy special as much as it was Harlem Nights. And, it's just there's like, oh, yeah, y'all got to leave. Me and my younger brother, it's like, y'all got to go elsewhere. Like, I don't care where you go, but we're enjoying this and you're too young for this. So, However, I remember distinctly watching Nightmare on Elm Street. No. Sorry. I remember watching Friday the 13th, 3 distinctly when I was 3 or 4 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Eating a chicken wing by myself in a bedroom. Just so the parenting on the vulgarity and that sort of thing, but when it comes to violence and
The violence thing was okay. It was you could watch whatever you want. Aliens, Jaws. There was no filter, but certain things, it was a hard line for sure.
and maybe there was a color element there too, or what have you, of he's a black kid. These are black people talking about this. Maybe he thinks this is cool, so we should maybe curtail that, nip that in the bud.
Yeah. He might be absorbing way too much of this.
Yeah. So when did you know that you were funny, in that sense of you wanted to pursue it? There are some people who are really funny. I judge that as a metric on if I'm going to get along with somebody. Mm-hmm. If I can make them laugh, and it depends on how much they've laughed. If they're yo, my ribs hurt, I'm yes, we're going to be friends. So when did you know that you were funny, that you're I want to go to this next level and maybe take it and write or maybe work with a comedy troupe? Tell me about that.
Well, growing up, like I said before, my family, we make jokes at the dinner table, we crack jokes, and that's just our love language in a way.
Sure.
And so when you get to college and you're hanging out with your friends and you're doing the same thing with the people that you love, people are laughing and you're oh, this is a currency. This is a thing that carries weight. And so it didn't really stick out to me as something, I should really lean into this, until I turned, into my late 20s when I met a very funny writer I helped her make her first short film. But I was like, man, your stuff's really good. Like, I want to get to where you are. How are you doing this? Like, I went to college to study film and video, and that's what I do now as a living primarily. But to see someone who's just starting out have such good material, written word, I was like, how do I get better? And so she introduced me to this comedy, open mic sketch jam kind of thing where you bring a sketch, people read it out loud on stage. And so I just wrote a sketch, didn't know what it was, just wrote a 4-page script. I had learned how to write scripts in college. So I just applied those same rules and went, and people liked it. And so I kept coming back and I kept writing more. And like any writing, that's what it takes. It's like you kind of have to like stick with it. And so it was a monthly event. I knew every third Saturday or Sunday, or whatever it was, I needed to bring a sketch. And so I was able to work on an idea and craft it out there. But really pulling from like what makes me laugh, what do I find funny, like what are the shows that I watch, what are the cartoons that I love, what did I grow up, was that joshing that I have in my family, like pulling from that as much as possible, and then being surprised that people actually also find it funny on paper. And so it was more like I tripped over a log on the way to trying to learn to write, that hey, there's a funny writing thing that's working for me.
I dig it. That's great. And yeah, I think being able to find like those people and having something that if you're on the fence and you're like, I'm not sure quite yet, but having something that's telling you that you regularly need to do this to work on that craft, because I think it's with anything. If you don't do it regularly, the bits that you get to are going to suck. And we do that work within the time that's permitted. So if it might be a month, that month might seem like a short period of time in between sessions or what have you. And sometimes when you're really, I'll use some DC slang here, when you're really in the pocket, as it were, you're able to really like just be there and just get this stuff and have that output. But if you get out of it, then suddenly you're like, all right, this is waning. I'm not as sharp, so on. And I find that in doing this, like I keep a really pretty strong schedule of stuff that's going out. But if I haven't touched the mic, or if I haven't looked at it or even written questions or researched or anything along those lines, it seems like it's mid. Something's off. It's not quite there. And yeah, like I've tried my hand at writing a few things here and there. So, I think not knowing like the structure on how to kind of get things down to paper, I think that served you very well, like knowing it, having that background in education. What are some of your influences within comedy filmmaking? And I have a part B to this, but I want to start off at least with the influences. Yeah.
My influence is really for the comedy side of things. I watched a lot of cartoons growing up, like every Saturday morning, that's what we did. And we had our favorite shows, So I'm talking about like Pinky and the Brain, Powerpuff Girls, Dexter's Laboratory, just stuff that's just kind of slapstick funny. That's probably like, pulling from I Love Lucy in a way, or Buster Keaton. And then like Mad TV. We were a Mad TV family. We didn't really watch a lot of Saturday Night Live, but Mad TV, was doing stuff you probably can't put on TV right now, but back in the day it was very, very funny. And then Dave Chappelle, was on TV at his height with the Dave Chappelle Show when I was in college. And so all that humor became like common language between me and my friends. And I think all that kind of Jim Carrey, these guys, Robin Williams, just had a sense of big characters, big personalities. And there's a lot, they're doing stuff I can't do, but like, I love the feeling that it gives you. And I think I try to paint absurdity into my comedy as much as I can. If I can get there to where like, this isn't a normal world and we're kind of taking our moment to get on stage and be silly. So let's be crazy with it. Like, why does things have to be normal for this to be funny? So let's try and push the bar if we can. And so that's where I lean in on the comedy side of things. And on the film side, I think it's I went to film school. So like my training in that is, I think, very less fun and more rigid. I took a lot of international film classes. So like the French New Wave stuff is like stuff that really, really sticks out to me. My Netflix, I still get the DVDs, and It's like 300 DVDs long, and I'm always adding to it whenever I read an article or I've come across something. Oh, I really want to watch that. So by the time the DVD gets to me, I've completely forgotten why I've put it on the list, or why I wanted to watch it. And so a lot of it's like international foreign films that have subtitles that you have to read, and it's like really random stuff, but I love it. And I feel like even if I'm not constantly shooting or making stuff, like I'm pulling from here. Like the last two I got were Cries and Whispers, which is a 1972 film. It's Swedish. It's very weird. It's very red. Like the guy's like obsessed with the color red. It's a very colorful film. And then the other film I got it's technically Danish, but it was shot in Thailand. It's Only God Forgives. It's a Ryan Gosling film.
Oh yeah, I know that one.
Yeah. The guy who made Drive made it, and it's one of those things where like he wrote a script, then got to Thailand, and then realized most of the actors couldn't speak English, so he just pulled the dialogue out and made the film anyway.
Yeah, and
it works so well. And so it's like stuff like that is the things I'm pulling for inspiration on the film side, that I'm hoping one day, you know, when I'm making films, TV shows, or whatever it is, I'm grasping moments of that and working them into my material.
That's great. I just think of that scene from it. It's like, hey, want to fight? Whoa, 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 whoa. It's like, yeah, hell yeah.
Everything moves in slow motion.
Yeah.
The guy it's just like, you got to watch it. It's one of those films. You're like, it ends. You're like, that's it? What?
Yeah, literally. I was like, hold up, what's happening here? I was like, this is wild.
Yeah. It's definitely out there. I appreciate his insanity when it comes to the stories he tells.
Tell me about any anti-influences. And I think that's usually not a question that people throw out there, nor do they really think of it. But it's like, what is an energy or creativity suck for you? And a lot of people will say comparison kills creativity is an example. So what would you say is an anti-influence for you?
Something that kills creativity for me is definitely social media and procrastination. It's a time suck. Things that are time sucks that actually don't add to your life just really, really kill creativity for me. If I need to sit down and write for an hour, 5 minutes into my writing, I'm on Facebook all of a sudden. And it's like, how did I get here? And it's like having to train my brain to turn off that stuff, or put my phone across the room so that I'm not being interrupted by stuff. That's the things I think that are truly, truly just draining on you creativity wise. And like, I don't own, a PlayStation, Xbox, or any of those video game stuff, just because I know that if I have it and I have to decide, like, let's take time to write, or, or to edit, or I can go play this new game, it's like, that's 4 hours gone just like that. I mean, I had fun. I enjoyed it. It's great. But I know that with my personality and the things I like to do, like, it can be too great of a temptation. So I try to remove those things as best I can from my life. And it's the only way to stay in that mindset. Otherwise it takes me the opposite direction and I get nothing done.
Yeah, I think that I try to add analog things to what I do to limit the amount of digital stuff that I have to do. So in instances, like I have a day job, as most of us do, where we're doing the creative stuff, and I'll go into the office for the day job, because we were like 60% remote or what have you. Nice. And when I need to like write down questions, actually get into the mindset to research, I got to go into the office. I can't be in the studio, because then it's just like, I'm not getting anything done. All of my cool stuff is in here. I'm going to start looking for anime and things of that nature to watch. But if it's in the office, I can almost look at the quality or the thinking that goes into the questions and say, oh, no, I definitely wrote this in the office, versus when I'm at home, it's almost like caveman talk as an interview question. So, yeah, it's a difference. You can see it. And I try to, if I notice that that's there, I try to polish it. But I find that if I'm just in my phone and coming up with questions, something's lacking. It's just not quite there. So since we're kind of around this and process influences and things of that nature, let's talk about your writing process a little bit. take us through it, if you will, like in terms of something that's in the beginning, something that's in the middle, and something that you're like, feel like I'm done here. I feel like I'm good. I'm satisfied. So tell me about that.
So Bad Medicine, which is a sketch comedy troupe I'm part of, we have a very tough writer's room where things go to die. And as they should. I mean, like only the best make it to the top. So before I even get to that part, I have to come up with an idea and workshop it and make it work for myself. So a lot of my content is just a joke that randomly came to mind, or someone said something I think is very funny and I want to expand on that. And so a lot of times I'll write the dialogue with no characters, just in my head, two voices back and forth, 3 pages of it, just like notes on my phone, just write it out, or in an email, just get it out of my system as fast as I can. And then once that's done, I'll go back and then I'll add the character names. I'll make sure that the setting is set up, that there's more detail about what's going on. Oh, they're wearing this, they're holding that. And then I'll put it more in a outline format. So I'll go back and I'll be like, okay, so beat 1. So this is the intro. And then beat 1, this is supposed to happen. Beat 2, this is supposed to happen. And then beat 3 is like this. And then I want it to end like that. And then I'll compare to see if I'm missing anything. Mm-hmm. If I'm missing anything, I'll add that in. And then I'll rewrite the sketch so that it's 100% in film script format. So the characters are centered and the dialogue's at, the 2 inches in and all that, just so that it's easy to read for the writer's room. And then I'll take that finished script. I'll either send it to somebody in the group before I take it to the writer's room, just so they could like quickly read over it and point out any major flaws. And then that will be taken in to be read by the group. And then our process is you bring a script, everyone, you cast it out among those who are in the writer's room. Everyone reads their part. And then you as the writer, don't say anything. Let them just give you that straight feedback, unfiltered. Don't try to be like, oh, well, I meant for this joke to be like this. I'm in for that. Let them tell you what worked and what didn't work. Take as many notes as you want. And then it's up to you to take that feedback and figure out how to do rewriting and how to make it work. And you can either take all of it, take half of it, take none of it. But definitely good writing is just rewriting. So like you're expected to bring that material back and have workshopped it some more yourself. Yeah. And, people have written jokes in the writer's room that are better than anything I've written. And so like, if I could take some of their stuff and punch it in or change a character or they're like, hey, the first half of this sketch is really great. That's the sketch. The last 2 pages, you don't need to cut them. Like it's brutal, but we're all working toward the same goal of having something that's very funny, that works for our group. And so like you kind of have to pour time into it in the beginning, but then be ready to let it go and it to live as a living document within the community, so that you can get to the end product. And at the end, I still feel like it's my sketch. It's what I've written. I still have all my notes saved on my phone and all the versions saved in Google Docs. So I know how I got to there. But so like, sometimes stuff gets so rewritten. It's like, wow, my character's name is the only thing that's left from the original sketch. Or sometimes it's like the meat of it's still there. This is great. Yeah. And, every idea is not great. Every idea is not a slap your knee funny. But like, I think the process of doing the work, setting yourself up, falling and executing on it is very key. And I'm a morning writer. So like, I got to get up. First thing I do is roll over to the computer and write for an hour. Otherwise, no phones, can't touch my phone, any of that stuff. Like I got to write in the morning when my brain is fresh. And when I follow that pattern, I follow that process, that's when I can, generate 8 sketches for a show, 7 sketches for a show. If I'm not doing that, I'm trying to write late at night, or if I'm like all over the place, it doesn't work. But yeah, that's the process I'm usually following.
How did that relationship and that kind of like partnership and part of that community come together with Bad Medicine?
So Bad Medicine really was born out of the open mic sketch jam that I was going to. Yeah. The people who were running that moved to Chicago. And so it stopped cold turkey. And then another Elizabeth Kemp, who I met through the open mic, invited me to a meeting. She's like, I want to start a sketch team. you can write, so come join us. And so I went, and she had invited a couple of people that she had taken sketch comedy classes with. And then we just started recruiting writers and actors, saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to put on a sketch show. We're starting a sketch team. And it kind of grew from there. And so I joined the group primarily to write. That was all I was really interested in. I don't want to be on stage. I don't consider myself an actor. If I'm on stage, something's wrong has happened. Not enough people volunteered. So now Isaiah has to act, which is not the greatest thing in the world, I will say. But I felt like this is how I continue the challenge. This is how I set new goals for myself, and people are counting on me to deliver. And so now it's going to force me to stay in the groove of writing and stay committed. And it has over the years. We've been coming up in November. It will be year 9.
Nice.
And it's like book a show, write for that show, rehearse for that show, perform that show, book another show, and just keep going and keep going and keep going. And we've done that. And people have come and gone. People have gone and come back. And, my position as being one of the founding members has grown to where now I'm producer for the group. I'm planning our shows. I'm planning our schedule. I'm making our contacts in different cities and stuff like that. But I'm still at the core of it, writing. And the group has just, it's full of theater people, musical theater people, a cappella people, people for filmmakers, people who only act, people who only write. And it's a good group. We've lucked out. We really have. It's very talented. It's people power that makes things happen. And I think the people that we've been able to pull in or steal or grab have really added to the group as we've grown and learn how to do this and do this better and better and better. That's
great to hear. It's great to hear. As time progresses, there are some things that aren't as funny as they used to be. You're like, it's a little cringe. And to the fact that you might say, I can't believe I wrote that. I've asked some questions that early, even in this podcast, that feel like less informed and at times even gauche. It's like, why would I even ask that? So over the last few years, have you made any attempts to modify your writing as tastes and as kind of the zeitgeist has changed, the consciousness has changed?
I mean, hats off to Gen Z, who are taking on the world by storm and have set a new standard for all. And some say it's killing comedy. I'm saying it's forcing us to evolve beyond where we are. And that should happen every time a new generation kind of comes out, which is a good thing. And so looking back at my old writing and what I was focusing on or how I was setting up characters or jokes, I'm making fun of people too much. I'm pushing a character who's being driven to mad or is being bullied. And I want to get away from that. And so moving forward, I'm trying to write more things where the setting is the joke, the situation's the joke, it's absurd, or the reality is really where the humor is. And it's no longer like, here are two roommates making fun of how someone talks. Yeah. It's not so much punching down, but it's less where the joke is a character being frustrated and more like the world is weird.
Yeah.
And I get more joy out of that. And I think the actors get more joy out of that when you don't have to be mean to someone on stage. I think that there's benefit there.
Yeah, I dig it. I dig it. I did a podcast for a very long time, for about 10 years, and it was taking current events and trying to elicit humor out of them. So it's like, hey, this is a wild story. And I would make some satire or something like, yo, shit is wild, isn't it? And,
yeah.
And I remember it was just one story that's a terrible story of some guy tried to kill himself, and he jumped off the top of a stadium or something. And he landed and killed another person. It was a woman. I was like, typical men, just ruining women every time. Just it's always something. And then the story was she was eating the burrito. And I'm like, I'm not even talking about the tragedy and all of that stuff. It's just the things that are associated with it. I'm taking that's where some humor can be at, while this is a terrible story that wasn't getting any coverage. And, I think that looking at these kind of other almost minutia sort of pieces around the thing, that's where the actual interesting stuff is at versus this person. So I definitely kind of agree where you're talking about this scene is weird. This climate is odd, not necessarily the people.
Yeah. Yeah. And we should be growing as creatives
Mhm.
If you're not looking back at stuff you did 2 or 3 years ago and are not cringing, you're not growing.
Mhm.
I
Absolutely.
definitely would say if I pulled out a sketch that I wrote 6 years ago and we read it, it'd be rough. It'd be very rough, not just in the content, but in the writing and the flow of it. And so like you want to get better, and you want to not like your older stuff.
Mhm. That's like when rappers are like, "Yeah, I want to listen to the old Jay-Z." It's like he probably hates his old music. Like, get out of
He
here.
probably does. He probably does. Probably it's banned in the house.
Yeah, it's like, where's my paintings at? I need to hug them. But I think that's the thing. I like the awkwardness of things, and I think that more of the surreal stuff, like especially this kind of juxtaposition of a place that's like I'm in Baltimore, based in Baltimore, so
Nice.
I want to see some of the more surreal stuff that I see happen here, with the backdrop of being the city that can be very gritty while being very like dope in so many ways. Those are the things that interest me, kind of flipping it. Like, these are the people that make up the culture of this place, and this place has this reputation, but also it's like these people are there. So which is the true reputation of a place versus like, hey, let's talk about this person with their different challenges, what have you. That's who, that's kind of what that is.
And I feel like a lot of media is kind of hooked on that, where it's like it's poking at the people a lot, and that's what gets you I would make a wild statement about someone, and then it creates argument and chatter and flame wars on the internet because everybody's arguing about the thing, the person that doesn't matter, but missing the big picture.
Mhm.
And so I want to focus on big picture stuff and setting, and not be like, hey, this guy wears a red shirt. Isn't that weird?
Oh my gosh, red shirts, huh?
Yeah. Let's move on.
How has filmmaking affected your approach to like writing sketches? Like, are there considerations made of like, I'm going to view this from being a filmmaker, being a writer, and apply that to like how this sketch should be out there in terms of your process? Because I can say, like, in doing this podcast, I do a little bit more curating than I ever knew that I was doing. So, for instance, while we're recording this to date it, I have a week of female filmmakers that I did interviews with.
That's awesome.
And it's just going out, and it is great. And in the past, it would just be like, that interview's done, put it out. That interview's done, put it out. Just kind of like, scattershot. Now it's like very intentional and very curated and timely. So tell me about that.
I think coming from a filmmaker background gave me a set of skills that allowed me to understand structure. But at the same time, I think it stifled me in a way. As a filmmaker, you kind of have a dedication to perfection, because you're making a video, you're making even a short film. It's locked. What you make is locked, and that's how everybody's going to experience it. And so you're focused on making sure everything is where it should be, and the pacing and the structure and the music and the emotion. You're very focused on it being perfect. Where like with sketch comedy, it's at its root core, it's theater. It's performance, it's live, it's experienced, different stages, different casts, different audiences. And so it needs to be more flexible, and there needs to be breathing room. And you have to be okay with someone dropping a line or adding a word or doing something different than they did last time. And I went into it so structured and having everything in its place that I think it stifled the comedy. And I kind of had to like unlearn some of that in order to be able to write breathing room for the actors to take a character and lean into something they like, or to pull back for something they don't like, and be comfortable with it and be fine with it, and being like, yeah, this is still, this is the part of the creative process. We're giving and going back and forth.
Yeah.
And I think coming into it as a filmmaker, I just was like not on the right track, and it's taken a long time to get to that where I'm flexible.
So we're on this last real question, and before we get to these rapid fire questions that everyone, even you, Isaiah, you get. So here we go. What are 2 to 3 interests that you have, like outside of like filmmaking, day job, and comedy writing and things of the sort. Like, what are you doing? Why are you spending your time, the few minutes you may have in between all of these things, and you're not sleeping? Tell me about that.
Yes. So if I am not working on one of those three things, I am probably, I love board games and I like designing board games.
Okay.
So I've been dabbling in that, kind of trying to like, collect game pieces and stuff and see if I can create little fun games I can play with my family and stuff. And, the photography thing is something that I've leaned into. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that I have this series of night photography that I've been taking on my iPhone since like iPhone 6 or 4 or whatever. And it's just, the idea was like, anytime I would go home from a bar, I would follow my walk home by taking pictures of things I saw and how I see the world. But back in the day, the iPhone was not very good at taking night pictures.
Right.
So I considered it like a challenge to take good night shots. Now every phone can do it easily, but it became like this kind of like therapy for me to like take 5 or 6 pictures every couple of nights and then like spend time like retouching them to get them to look a certain way, how I saw them.
Yeah.
And that was a great creative outlet that used like a different part of my mind than the other stuff uses. It's like, that's usually really where my interests lie. It's like, if it tickles a different part of my brain that's not being drained by, the comedy and the filmmaking and the day to day, then I'm like, oh, let's lean into this, but don't lean into it so much that it now becomes this new side hustle that eats up 6 hours of my day. So it's trying to keep that stuff in place. And I love the Container Store. So if I'm not doing any of that, for some reason, I'm in the Container Store walking around.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And so now, in the final moments we have here, I got some rapid fire questions. And as we've been going through this, I've been editing and adding questions to this because you've become more interesting as we've gone through. So indulge me. And remember, brevity is the key here. We don't want to overthink these.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you a softball, if you will, to start off. Sorry or Monopoly?
Sorry, because Monopoly ends in bankruptcy usually.
I like it. On a Friday night, you're doing what?
Friday night, I'm doing laundry because there's no one doing laundry in my building.
Now it's going to get progressively weirder.
Oh, no.
Tell me a song that's on your Toxic or Ratchet playlist.
Toxic or Ratchet playlist?
Because I feel like we all have one, and people, even people who are like, I'm this dude. It's like, yeah, you got something wild on there. Everyone does.
It's either going to be something from Megan or Migos still. I mean, if you ever pull up Migos, if you haven't listened to them in a while, man, like they're on to something. Their old stuff is great.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I mean, I every now and again, I don't like the fact that Instagram is part of me networking now, but I find songs that are old and I'm like, oh, usually it's like through some goofy highlight video or something. Like I found like this old Project Pat song earlier and I was like, hold up. Why did I not know about this? This is 24 years old. I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah. What's getting new life thanks to social media is insane. It's so random.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your go-to drink?
My go-to drink is gin and tonic.
Okay. I'm going to save the movie question for later. And so letting you know that there's a movie question.
Okay.
What actual medicine would you describe as bad medicine?
Whoa. What actual medicine I would describe as bad medicine? Wow. Wow, that's a great one. I will say, I feel like there's a cough syrup that's just like, like you did take it and it's just nasty, but it works. It's just, it's a liquid cough syrup. I just remember taking it as a kid and it's just like, it's one of those things you're just like, there's nothing else that tastes like it. And it ruins anything you eat afterwards, but it works.
Yeah. I've recently I bought this stuff off a steak. It's this like honey cough syrup that
Ooh.
it's literally just a really, really thick, dark honey. And it's super expensive too. I bought the one for kids because I guess it has less of the active ingredient in it. And I was like, this is doing nothing. I'm just sitting there just drinking it. I was like, I think I have a problem just drinking scissor at this point.
Yeah, you are.
But it's like, oh, natural scissor. I was like, I'm a hipster, but also an addict at this place. Lastly, what are 3 of your favorite movies from the last year?
From the last year?
Because you're a movie guy, so I can't just say all time.
Yeah, now you narrowed it down. I almost have to pull up my film app.
Just pull up Letterboxd. It's like,
yes, that's exactly where I'm going. I don't even know if these films are from this year. I think you could search by year. 2020 is 2022. Is that the year we're in?
That is the year we're in.
All right. Dude. Wow. All right. I'm gonna give you the 3 that came out this year. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Number 1, I'm going to call it's kind of a film. It's called The House. It's on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's a claymation, not claymation, but it's stop animation. It's very good. It's 3 different stories, beautifully done. If you like the Fantastic Mr. Fox, it's kind of like in that style, but it's not a comedy. It's very serious.
Got it.
I really love the Batman.
Same.
I know it's like people didn't like it, but I was so happy to see a different approach to Batman. I feel like we get the same Bruce every time. And it's like, let's just mix it up. Why not? Like, give me a different Batman, give me a different motive, change up the characters. I do think you could cut Catwoman out of that film and the same film would progress perfectly fine without her.
You get a buddy cop movie in the middle of it, which is what I want. I was like, oh, Gordon with his, sidearm and his high top fade or whatever he's got going on with that wig.
Yeah. It works. Yeah. It definitely works. I'm not going to buy it, but if it's on TV at any point, I will leave the TV on. Like whenever it hits HBO and it's just always on, I will be like, oh, it's on. Yeah. I'm going to leave it on. It's just that good. And Sonic 2.
Really?
Yes. Jim Carrey, I'm such a big fan, and he carries so many films. And that one, for some reason, just like he's great in it. The Sonic animation works. It's a kid's movie, but he really makes it work. Like you couldn't cast anyone better for that role. And I know he's acting to like nothing. Like I know there's nothing around him. Yeah. But the amount he's pouring into that is like, if you like The Grinch and his performance there, you'll love Sonic 2.
Well, thank you. And I like the first one, so that's an endorsement. I will be checking out the second one then. And you make me want to now rewatch Batman.
So good, man.
You give me things to do.
Just the red, just the colors, the saturation, the Riddler's character, the shadows. It's just like the whole thing. It's beautifully done.
Well, thank you. Well, there you have it. I want to thank you again for coming on to this podcast. This has been delightful. And I want to invite and encourage you to tell the fine folks where to check out your work, where to check out Bad Medicine, all of the stuff. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Of course, if you want to see the comedy that I'm writing, producing, directing, go to badmedicinecomedy.com. Everything is there. Our schedule, our classes, our videos, the podcast I also produce, that sketch comedy base, that Sketch Nerds. It's all there. So badmedicinecomedy.com.
Well, there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Isaiah Headen for coming on to the podcast. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there are creators, artists, comedians, writers, and then around your neck of the woods, filmmakers as well. You just got to look for them.